welcome back to another episode of the ICIS Energy Foresight podcast. And today I have a special guest with me, someone, a special episode for you, Nicola Rega, Executive Director of Energy and Climate Change at Cefic. Hi, Nicola.
Hi, Matteo. Thanks for having me with you today.
It's a pleasure and honor to have you on, and I'm very happy to have this chance to have a conversation with you around probably one of the hottest topics in the energy space at the moment, which is, industrial demand and I think all the challenges that European industries are facing at the moment. But as a starting point, can you please tell our listeners who is Cefic and what's your role, what you are responsible for, especially for our non-European audience?
Sure. And thanks again. So Cefic is representing the European chemical industry. So as such, we are representing all producers of chemicals in Europe, regardless of their national origins. The important thing is that they are producing in Europe. In this function, we are representing the interest towards the European institutions, and as well, we are collaborating with other sister associations across the globe, like the European chemical industry in the US, in Canada, in Japan, in the Middle East, Brazil. And in our specific role, we are working on the files of energy and climate change. I'm leading the department. We have a team who is specifically looking at all the EU policies which have a direct or indirect impact on the chemical industry. The chemical industry is an energy-intensive industry. Therefore, we are very sensitive to everything that has an impact on the energy component cost, which is the key, together with raw materials, is the key cost that makes a difference between being in the market or being out of the market. The chemical industry is the largest industrial energy consumer in Europe, is the largest consumer of electricity, the largest consumer of natural gas, the largest consumer of petrol-based products, particularly naphtha. So we are active in all the domains. And when it comes to looking forward, we have an issue now when it comes to competitiveness of the industry in competing in the global market. At the same time, you're also looking at what is our path towards climate neutrality by 2050. And in all these paths, we see there is a growing role for energy needs. And so there's also a matter of understanding how do we move forward on this path towards climate neutrality, and what is the role that energy and climate policies will play in shaping this future.
There's a lot to unpack there. There's been a lot of talks around industrial demand and the role of the challenges that different types of industries, but especially the chemical industry, is facing at the moment, which is trying to tackle on one side the conundrum around international competition, how to compete against global players and their policies. And on the other side, or as you said, the need to decarbonize. In all of these, I think that, which has been going on for the past 2 decades, but that challenge has become a massive challenge over the past 2 years after, especially after the invasion of Ukraine, with prices that went to the roof and proved to be quite a challenge, if not a major problem for a lot of industries. There have been a lot of talks around demand destruction or demand savings. There have been policies aimed at targeting demand savings, especially in industries. But what we have seen over the past 9 to 6 months is a little bit of an open question, because energy prices have started to come down. They're definitely lower compared to where they were like 12 months ago or 18 months ago. not let alone 2 years ago when the price of gas went to 350 euros. Yet we are still seeing chemical factories running at very low capacity.
Perhaps to answer to your question, we need to, I would say, a bit unpack all the building blocks, because as it often in our case, the answer is not straightforward. There are lots of different components in that. First of all, energy efficiency, so energy savings versus industrial demand destruction. That is one element that needs to be a bit better unpacked. Europe comes already from historically relatively high energy prices, which has gone on for quite some decades. These have really dictated quite some energy efficiency improvements in industry. So we are coming from a long way of continuous improvements in our production processes. That has led to a certain degree of efficiency rates, and also the fact that we have been moving towards accelerating, I would say, investments that have given a payback time, which of course with high energy prices it gets shorter, but those were measures that had a clear horizon in terms of payback. Then we were hit by the energy crisis, and that was requiring emergency measures, which have led to production curtailment, and that is, I would say, a demand destruction, because we have not been improving efficiency; we've been just stopping or reducing substantially production. Then we are going to the next phase, and it is true that energy prices have gone down compared with the energy crisis times, but they are still higher than the pre-crisis period. So there is still a gap that needs to be filled, and we're not sure if that gap will ever be filled. The reason being that now, as one of the effects of the crisis and of the war in Ukraine, is that Europe is much more reliant on LNG shipping of natural gas. That is structurally more expensive than just having natural gas delivered by pipelines. With electricity prices which are linked one way or the other to gas prices, then we have the double impact of having prices which are higher than they were before, and we don't know if this will be totally offset with the different measures. So we have that situation which is still there, coupled with a very weak demand in Europe for industrial products. We have been going through difficult times. Now it seems that the outlook is a bit better, but the recovery is not strong, and we are living in very volatile times. So companies are really going from one quarter to the other. So that's the visibility that we are having now, which makes it difficult to do long-term planning and to understand exactly what are the implications on the long term. Because, of course, a weak demand means that also as a target market is not particularly attractive. At the same time, we need to see also what's happening in the rest of the world. Of course, all eyes are on China. China is by far the largest chemical producer in the world. Just to give you a dimension of what does it mean, if you look at the top 10 world producers of chemicals, China comes first, Europe second, US third, and so forth. If we combine together all the 9 runner-ups, the total production of the 9 runner-up countries don't match the production of China. So being the second is good, but it's a very big gap. And China is getting into overcapacity. So we don't know to what extent that extra production will come to Europe, when, how, and in which amounts. At the moment, something is moving. Too hard to call to see if it's a structural change or something which is just contingency. But the level of nervosism is definitely high among our members. So if you combine with high energy prices and weak demand and potential oversupply coming to Europe from other countries, the situation is at, I would say, alert level.
Yeah, it's a very, very dangerous recipe, I would say, especially one difficult to predict in terms of the future outcome, especially in terms of decisions that I believe a lot of companies need to make. But I'll try to play devil advocate in this, Nicola, and allow me to do that. So there is an element of facing expensive prices, especially when we talk about gas, as you said, and obviously that is reflected into power prices, because gas is still pretty much the marginal source in a lot of power markets all across Europe. Yet there is an easy provocation there, which goes towards the idea that Europe is trying to decarbonize, and solar and wind are already much cheaper in terms of power sources to generate electricity than gas. We are seeing more and more industries becoming interested in PPAs, and I've spotted that that is the case also for a lot of chemical companies. Isn't that the right solution to both tackle the exposure to price volatility or high energy prices and greening and to green their consumption?
We are definitely looking at PPAs. As you were mentioning, our companies have been stepping up quite substantially in their efforts in signing PPAs, even in joining, in some cases, the development of certain, particularly wind parks. This being said, we also need to have a look at the bigger picture. Two things. First, the PPAs help with addressing the wholesale price, but we are still paying for network charges, fees, taxes, levies, whatever comes on top of it, which actually gives the total gives a final picture which is quite far from the numbers that we see in the wholesale price. And that also, it's often forgotten, but there are a lot of embedded costs of the system which are coming through the bill. That's the one thing. Secondly, PPAs are also becoming a bit more of a complex animal to deal with. And we need to find solutions for this. The reason is, in the past, PPAs were at the beginning pretty much providing a product which was quite good for industrial consumers, which are baseload electricity consumers. So there was a product which was delivering a certain amount of electricity over the year, and that was pretty much a good match for industrial consumers. Then the market has evolved, particularly also because of the emerging of more and more renewables, like you were mentioning, wind and solar, which are more variable in terms of production, and this has been passed on to the consumers in the sense that now the market offers what they call pay as produced. This means that the companies receive electricity when the electricity is produced, and then that is covered by the contract. And then they need to go on the market to buy for the electricity that they need when there is no production. That brings additional balancing cost, backup cost that the industrial consumer needs to bear, meaning that at the end of the day, the financial benefit is not as big as it would look like in the first sight. And secondly, it requires a capacity building from companies that are not necessarily present everywhere, especially in small and medium enterprises. So if to sign PPAs, we ultimately need to go through some intermediaries, that is certainly possible, but then also that brings additional cost to the final consumer. So I'm not saying these are obstacles that cannot be overcome, but also word of cautious that PPAs are a good product in the market is not the panacea to all problems that the industry is facing.
Yeah, so as always, there is an element that obviously of maturity that will come when more and more players will join the market, and obviously simpler structures will probably let more players adopt these PPAs and become more familiar with that. We are seeing these happening across the board, and while it was, as you correctly said, while it comes also kind of natural with companies in the tech space like the Amazon, the Microsoft, or the Google, to let's say to name a few, to sign PPAs, given that they have a base load profile, and obviously that the electricity waits for a minor share so far. Now there's a whole AI word which probably will need further attention when it's about electricity consumption, but this is probably one for another time. But it is interesting to see how the PPA space will become simpler and more open for a lot of industries that will definitely benefit from that going forward. But linked to that, which is still it's still in the energy transition / decarbonize space, the difficult provided in signing PPAs, so with the idea of looking forward 5 to 10 years out, isn't kind of the same for carbon, where you need a long-term signal, and possibly a stable one, for an industry like a chemical company in driving any decision or any choice on how to abate the emissions that they produce. And in that, to make it even more complicated, without getting into politics, is the CBAM going to help companies in doing that, or will complicate even more the whole decision-making process?
Good questions. Difficult to predict, but putting things together, certainly we are lacking visibility on how the carbon framework will be working after 2030. We have seen graphics from the European Commission showing ambitious targets for 2040, yet having residual carbon emissions from industry in the system. And we still don't know how would that play out. And as long as we don't have a clear answer on how that framework would work, clearly it is difficult for companies to start planning investments. So that's one thing is missing. Another thing which is missing before we go to the CBAM is something that I would say many observers have not yet figured it out, especially from I would say, from an investment point of view. We were mentioning at the beginning of this podcast about the energy efficiency measures that were deployed until now. Now, the energy efficiency measures had a return on investment. In moving towards deep decarbonization, we are entering into an area where pretty much all the options that we can think of at the moment, they end up into higher OPEX. High OPEX means that if there is no market that is prepared to recognize or these investments and to create a market for these products, which are carrying higher OPEX costs, it is difficult to imagine how could investments be unlocked, unless if you start thinking about massive subsidies running across Europe, which I'm doubtful that can happen in a structural, long-term way. So that brings to the next piece of the puzzle is the CBAM. The CBAM, it's a tool that is there and it's expected to be expanded and potentially taking over also the chemical industry. We are looking cautiously at what's happening with other sectors, which are the first to be brought under this framework. The chemical industry is quite complex and there are very different entry points where a product can access the European market. We need to be careful to see exactly how do we control these entry points to make sure that we are not creating a wall, but then there is space to pass on the side of the wall and then getting through without much of an effort. Equally, the chemical industry is an export-oriented sector. And at the moment, the CBAM framework does not have provisions to support industries which are export-oriented. So we're having a higher cost, which puts us at competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So at the moment, the framework, it's, I would say, incomplete at best. Yet it's one tool to prevent carbon leakage. We need to look at it. But without visibility for investments and without having a market which is rewarding these low carbon products, CBAM might not suffice.
Thanks for this. I think it's an open issue which is quite difficult to address, especially as you said that there is an element of visibility which is past 2030, which will probably come with the new institutions after the recent elections that we had. But in this, and probably this is the last question I would ask you, do you see a role for something like carbon contract for difference in helping industries in reducing a bit the uncertainty around all these elements, all these moving parts to a certain extent, provided that CBAM doesn't address export, and this is something that probably should be put under the right lenses.
Carbon quota for difference is definitely part of the solution and is most welcomed. And it's probably needed to kick off some of the technologies. The issue is always what is the end point? And because this is an intervention with government intervention, being a European, being a national level, and it needs to have a clear point of destination and direction, because it cannot be an unlimited support scheme if there is no convergence in prices. And equally, industry is quite large. We have, I don't remember how many dozens of thousands of installations under the emission trading system. So it's definitely a very costly tool if you want to have it delivered to everybody. And if not to everybody, who is meant to be the first to receive? Again, in a logic where that would be a market opener, whereby it would help reducing the cost of new technologies, sure. But if that doesn't happen, and that's because it brings us back to question number one, that is, if we are ending into a higher OPEX environment, we need to see how feasible is this solution on the long term. So in the short term, I think it's good. It might be fit for purpose, but if it's not complemented with the other pieces of the puzzle on its own, it might be something that we can see in a very handful of cases, and then pretty much money is gone.
Yeah, it's always tricky, especially to when you have 27 countries that need to decide on something that is shared and common. Nicola, thanks again. It was super interesting. It's very hard to sum it up all in one sentence, but I would probably say that the chemical industry is definitely between a rock and a hard stone, especially at the moment, as Eddie is saying. Thanks again. I hope to see you again. It would be interesting to see whether something changes in a year or so. I'll probably ring you back, and enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me with you, and it's been a pleasure. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.